I'm Tim, the Brand Weaver, and this is Branding for Breweries, the podcast that helps you grow your brewery, build a better brand, and connect with more drinkers. Each week, I'm joined by the brightest minds in the beer world, sharing practical tips to help your brewery stand out and sell more beer. Let's get stuck in. How cool was that? I've got an intro now. I'm like proper professional and everything. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. 24-hour party people. Thank you, as always, for joining me today here on Branding for Breweries. I am Tim, your host, the Brand Weaver. And if you don't know by now, this is the show that brings the brightest minds in the beer world together to benefit your brewery, to help you thrive and survive and achieve as much as you possibly can with the limited time and limited finance that you have. And today is no exception because I am joined by the wonderful Alice Salisbury. She is the founder of ICC. She is the advisor or consultant, strategic partner, I suppose that's the word I'm looking for, to CEOs, CMOs of some of the world's most iconic drinks brands. And Alice is going to be helping us to peel back the secrets of some of the bigger drinks industries so you smaller guys and girls can start to leverage some of their strengths against them and do super duper well. So without further ado, let's bring Alice to the stage and we can have a good old chinwag. Alice, hi.
Oh, hi, look at that. The tech worked. That's fantastic. I love the video as well. Great opening video. Very professional.
Oh, thank you, mate. I just hope that it doesn't wear thin and annoy people over a couple of watches. We'll find out, though. I'm sure people will let me know. They're always very vocal about these things, so I love it. But that's enough about my intro. Alice, people want to know who you are. This is the wonderful thing. They've gifted us 40 minutes of their well-earned ear, eye, mouth time, whatever they're using to consume this information. So would you be a darling and please share a little bit of background about yourself and, of course, ICC, so we know who you are and where you come from.
Of course. I love the idea of 40 minutes of ear time. That sounds fantastic. Brilliant. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me on. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm Alice, as you say, a founder of ICC, but I've been working in the alcohol category now for more years than I want to say live on camera, but an awfully long time. I started out my career with people like working brands like from Diageo, Guinness, Johnny Walker, brands like that. And I think across the last kind of 25 years, I've probably now worked with every one of the largest selling alcohol brands and the kind of top 10 alcohol brands in the world, including we had this conversation. So I haven't managed Ciroc. Ciroc is like my Pokemon. I've got to get it, otherwise I haven't done them. But yeah, I've been specializing in alcohol for a while, and perhaps a little bit different, I suspect, from some of the people you normally talk to. We tend to work at a kind of global level, portfolio level, exec level. So, but with people like Diageo, Pernod Ricard, AB InBev, Carlsberg. So the kind of big global players on their big global powerhouses. So yeah, try not to give away too many secrets on the show.
Oh, come on. You've got to. This is why you're on the show. I was like, Alice, you just have to reveal all. Like, we need to know. It's very much a David and Goliath situation that I find with a lot of the indie breweries. They're like, oh, the big dogs, how do we take them on? How do we hack away at their heels? So hopefully, if you're not going to reveal everything, all the secrets, then at least we can get a couple of swift shots in at below the belt, I suppose.
Okay, let's see how much you can draw out.
Wicked. Challenge accepted. Game on. But I think that the biggest way to dive into this is, of course, with the CBER Indie Beer campaign and the statistics being released that, big beer, they dominate on availability, distribution, they're taking taps left, right, and center. And this is where our conversation actually started around the LinkedIn environment. And I actually reached out to you to say, let's chat about this more. You've got an interesting take where actually the smaller breweries, the smaller independents, they maybe shouldn't be focusing on that because they've got other opportunities in different places. So what would your rebuttal be, if you are a smaller brewery and you're worried about, taps being taken over by the big dogs? What can you do? What is the alternative?
Okay, so, I mean, the first thing I would say, and I hope this doesn't end up sounding disparaging or dismissive, and I really don't mean it to at all. But I do, because I spend a lot of time watching the startup market and the small brewers, because that's where a lot of the trends and the kind of new wave of things comes from. So it's really important to keep an eye on it. But a lot of the kind of discourse I hear is, I mean, you just used it yourself, this kind of David and Goliath language. Like the big guys are the bad guys, and they're evil and they're nasty and they're locking up taps and they're making it impossible for little guys to get in. And I mean this in the nicest possible way. They really, really are not trying to lock you out. They don't even know you exist. Like, and I mean that nicely. Like that, when ABM InBev go into whether it's on trade or off trade, and think about their selling story and think about what they're trying to achieve, they're not thinking, how do we keep the little guys out at all? What they're thinking is, how do I keep Heineken out? And when Heineken go in, what they're thinking is, how do I keep Carlsberg out? They're not, there's very, very little kind of, I mean, actually probably less than there should be amongst those bigger brands. There's very, very little discourse about the smaller players, the craft brewers, what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve. So I think the first thing to say is, don't go into that situation assuming the big guys are trying to be mean and trying to push back on you. They're not. They're just not even paying attention, and more fool them, but they're really not. So I think that's just the first thing to say, because I think it's an unhelpful mindset to get into, of kind of them versus us. I think in terms of the way you, I mean, if you want to focus on distribution specifically, because I know that is where our story started, was our conversation started, kind of how do you get into those taps, and particularly the on trade, but also shelf space on off trade, which is incredibly hard to break into as well. And I think there's kind of three things you've got to have in place, and this is the same whether you are small or big. It's just that big players tend to have this really locked down. They tend to know this stuff. It's their bread and butter. They do it. They have whole teams dedicated to doing it. So there's three things you've got to have. And it sounds really, really obvious. But when I have spoken to smaller players and smaller breweries, actually it's remarkable how little of this they've got in place. So number one is your sell-in story. And I think most brands don't have this. And if they do, they haven't quite understood what a sell-in story is. The second thing is your product story. And again, I know, and this is probably going to be controversial, but I think where a lot of smaller brands fall down is their product story. We'll come back to that. And then your third thing is your comms plan and how you're going to plan. And when you go to any distributor, whether it's on trade or off trade, some version of those three things, what you've got to put in front of them. So tell me if you want me to stop talking. Otherwise, I'm just going to break those three things down for you.
No, that's exactly where I need you to go now. It's like, well, what's the difference between a sell-in story and a product story? Like they're both stories, but for the listeners, how do we differentiate?
Yeah. So your sell-in story is not about you. It's entirely about them. So and actually the big brands make this mistake quite often as well. They'll walk into a distributor and kind of go, or an on-trade environment, and kind of go, let me tell you about us. Let me tell you why we're interesting, why we're wonderful, what makes us unique. Let me tell you about our product. That is not a sell-in story. A sell-in story is, let me tell you about you. Let me tell you about your customers, how you make money, what you need to get more people through the door. And that is what your trade environment are interested in. They're interested in, where are the gaps in my range? What am I not delivering that actually, if I did a little bit more, I could raise my prices more. Maybe it would make me more competitive versus the bar next door. If you're a corner shop, how do I get people to walk through my door to get their tinnies for when they're going for a picnic in the park, rather than go to Sainsbury's because they're on discount? That's what they're interested in. And I think more often than not, when I speak to perhaps the slightly less experienced beer brands, or any alcohol brands actually, they think their selling story is all about them, but the selling story is all about the person you're talking to. So, and this, I think, I mean, which was where my kind of comment to you about, like, hang on, actually, this is where you should have an advantage as a small player. Because I know you were asking me, like, well, the big guys have got so much research, they can do all this kind of audience understanding piece.
Yeah.
But no, they do, and they spend millions on it, and that is true. And I'm guessing most of the kind of small beer brands don't have millions to spend on research. But what they can do is know their area and know those individual stores, individual bars, individual pubs far better than any of the big guys. So by definition, big players have got to kind of make their selling story quite generic. It's got to be something that works for everybody. But if you're smaller, if you're local, you can tailor that selling story to each individual bar. So you can stand, I mean, obviously without looking a bit stalkerish, but you can, I say this as someone who basically like stands around in supermarket aisles watching people buy spirits. I find it absolutely fascinating. But if you can avoid looking weird, go and stand, if you've got say 10 target bars, go and stand outside those target bars. Who goes in, what times of day, roughly what do you see them go and sit in the bar and watch? What are people ordering? How frequently are they ordering? Which are the most poured pints? Which is not getting picked up? Are you seeing tables where everyone orders the same thing or where people order lots of different things? Try and get some real insights about who's going into that specific venue and what for. Look at your local area. What are the demographics? What are the groups of people? Is it changing? Is it shifting? Are there new bars opening up? Is the bar that you're targeting, has it got new competition that it perhaps needs to compete with? That is insider local knowledge that you have that no big player can possibly match. And so does that kind of make sense? I think the opportunity to do a phenomenal selling story is really there for smaller breweries in a way it just isn't for the big guys.
No, I think it makes a huge amount of sense. In my mind, I'm wondering if the brewery's better off going like secret shopper on this and trying to gather the information, because I can see the benefit of actually going, I'd love to come and hang out at the bar for an hour, because you're actually showing how much you care about helping them in their own business.
Absolutely. And I think that is it. That's what you're trying to demonstrate. Because big companies, big brands, they demonstrate they care in different ways through things like infrastructure and tech. So, you want an ordering system that's really simple for your team to use. Don't worry, we can plug into that. You need your deliveries made at 5:30 a.m. on a Tuesday precisely because that's when you've scheduled your bar stop. We can do that. So the logistics side of things, the bigger brands are really good at showing that they get what companies need. But I think you're absolutely right. How do you demonstrate that you get it too and that you want to pay attention and that actually you're going to go that extra mile? That goes a really long way. I think it's fine. Yeah, it's absolutely fine to say, look, do you mind if I just come and hang out and watch and promise not to upset your customers? But just to see what's going on.
Yeah, as a bar owner, just running through that conversation. Oh, what you actually just want to come and sit down, check out how we operate, so you can really help us out. It's a no-brainer ultimately. Like, crack on, be my guest. So then that's the selling story, which makes so much sense. It's not about your bar, it's about how you help that bar, that tap room, that bottle shop, wherever it is that you're trying to get the beers into. But then how does that differ to the product story? And when are we using the product story over that of the selling story?
So once you've established this is what this particular, let's say, bar or corner shop, wherever it needs and what would help, then the question is, how does your product meet those needs? So this is when you are allowed to start talking about you. I'm not saying you should never talk about you, but establish what they need first, then show how your product meets that particular need. And I guess so again, this is where I will possibly get myself in trouble a little bit. So then, but also to be honest with your viewers, like the number one story that I tend to hear, well, there's two stories that I tend to hear from craft beer brands: quality and authenticity. Okay, don't laugh.
You're completely right. Yeah, I'll throw in a sense of community into that as well for the bingo card.
Yeah, we're part of your community. Okay, great. Yeah, so I think they're bollocks. They're absolute bollocks. Okay,
yes.
So let's take the first one, quality. All right. You're not better quality, you're just a different definition of quality. I don't think it's true that mass market beer brands are poor quality. They're just different quality, okay? And what do I mean by that? Like 90% of people who walk into a pub and order a pint of lager, I hate to break everyone's heart, but what they want is something that's a reasonable price, a familiar taste, and they're not going to look a prat ordering it. and that's it. Like, they're not necessarily looking for a load of depth. They're not looking for an interesting flavor. They definitely don't want to take the risk that they order something and then say, oh, you're going for a juicy IPA. Oh my God, that's so last season. You know, like, nobody wants that. They want something standard and easy. And for 90% of beer purchasers and lager purchasers, that is good quality. So I think when you walk into trade and you say, well, look, you're not stocking quality brews, they're like, well, yeah, what I'm stocking is what my customers want. 90% of my customers want. So quality is not enough. So the first question is coming back to that sell-in story. Okay, if 90% of people want that straightforward standard lager experience, what do the other 10% want? Or the other 10% of people, or other 10% of situations? And how do you demonstrate that your product delivers on that? So, and again, this is where you have an opportunity to tailor the message to your specific marketplace. So is it demographics in the area are changing and actually there's a younger group of people coming through? Or is it that there are particular times of year when people want something more celebratory? Is it that actually there's a particular type of food that the pub or the bar has started serving, and you can make a product that goes perfectly with that type of food and is perfect served for it? So you can really tailor it to the individual message, the individual venue. But you've got to show how your product fills a gap, and fills the gap that you've identified for them already. And it's got to be more than, yeah, you're selling crap. Sorry, you told me to turn it off. I did turn it off, but it started again. Sorry.
So good.
Yeah, you've got to demonstrate that actually you've got more than just a we're better quality, honest kind of offer. Because I promise you, I absolutely promise you, if you walk into your average bar and say to the owner, we're better quality, I mean, they'll smile and they'll be polite, but inside they think, oh God, not another one. And it's boring. So that's quality. Mentioned authenticity. You might have to talk about the community one, but okay, so authenticity. This is the one that really winds me up. Sorry, I get really ranty.
I love this. This is just like, it's a venting hour for Alice.
Sorry,
and another thing.
Another thing. Right, authenticity. Okay, so some of my clients are 500 years old. I work with beer brands owned by the big guys, owned by kind of the big breweries, that are brewed in castles. There's one brewery I went to that they brew a really big name beer brand that you can see on Sainsbury's, but they're the Asian outpost, so they brew it locally. They're absolutely determined to get exactly the same flavor profile as the European version. They're really concerned about quality of ingredients and water in particular. So they have this amazing koi carp, I think that's how you say it, koi carp pond, full of fish. And basically there's just one person there whose job it is to look after the fish. And if the fish start to look at all ill, all production stops, because it might mean there's something wrong with the water. Which is
intense.
It's really intense. But we're talking about brands that go back hundreds of years. Those kind of, whatever that kind of artisanal heritage hop that you're using, I can pretty much guarantee that was invented and developed by one of the larger breweries in their kind of, they've all got incredible sort of scientific backgrounds as well. Whereas most, not all, I really want to stress not all, but you'll have a kind of conversation with somebody who's starting up a beer brand, and they'll kind of go, yeah, because I don't know, sorry, I'm going to be really fancy now, but Crispin and I, we stopped working for the hedge fund because it just wasn't us anymore. I decided to start a brand that we feel really passionate about, that's really authentic. We're doing that for 18 months. Okay, great, because my brand's been going for 500 years. And I think that's, so when you talk about authenticity, I'm being mean, and I know this isn't true for everybody, but I think a lot of small craft brands talk about authenticity. In what way? What makes you more passionate than a big player that's been going for not just decades, but centuries? what is it that you're doing that's kind of more culturally connected, or that is really bringing something new to the beer game that I should pay attention to and I listen to? And I think, again, I'm going back to the distribution. I think far too many people walk into a bar or a pub or a shop and say, we're local and we're small and we're passionate. And firstly, actually, there are dozens of startup beer brands now. So there's lots of people who are local and small and passionate, but also it actually doesn't sound that authentic. It doesn't sound true. So I think you've got to get to a story that's richer and more interesting and does really demonstrate that you are bringing something different and something new. Because otherwise, well, okay, I could have any one of the small, kooky, slightly punk brands that are around at the moment.
I think that makes it, well, yeah, it's a huge amount of sense, and something that I talk to a lot of breweries about as well. It's like, it's no good just being, oh, we create this beer, or it's like, yeah, but what's the next thing? What are the other passions, other interests that you fold into this wonderful kind of like cake that you're baking of a brand that is going to make it appeal to a particular audience type? One thing I did want to talk about though is we've talked about trying to get into taps and bars where big beer is. Is there a merit in actually the smaller breweries not even focusing on the same locations and trying to spend, their attention and time in different venues that might not be as accessible to the bigger breweries?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, not giving away too many trade secrets, but it's true. Like, small independents are hard and expensive to manage. Like, if you're a big brand, you want to win the big accounts. Not always. I mean, you might focus on one or two kind of really, say if you're at the kind of premium end, there might be some premium venues that you want to focus on. But the big accounts tend to be where you're kind of putting your money and where you're putting your time. And I think it's always, sorry, somebody was using this phrase the other day. I thought it was a really good one. It's like, the way you get big is by over optimizing. So you can only get big by deciding what the things you're going to focus on, where you're going to put your resources, and then spending all your time and resources on that. So big brewers, big alcohol brands generally, tend to be geared up to service large chains with, that's the thing that we were talking earlier about, the kind of, we can plug into your ordering system, we can plug into your delivery system, that kind of thing. That works really well for larger chains. Smaller independents, or perhaps venues like cinemas and things like that might not necessarily have, and I know increasingly there are fewer independent cinema locations, but there are some who might not have quite that kind of, they're not going to have the same infrastructure as Wetherspoons. They need a bit more support. Like, how do I order? What do I order? You tell me. What? Actually, smaller brewers are really, really well placed to support that. And again, really well placed to show them how to actually generate business. I mean, I think, I know we're going to come on to this, but the kind of com story, for example, like, just say you were talking about a small local corner shop that's right. So where I live in Brixton Brewery. Well, everyone will probably be familiar, but I live in Brixton, and we have this kind of big area called Brockwell Park. And there's one corner shop that's right next to Sainsbury's. But that corner shop does an absolutely fantastic job of selling beers to people who want to go into the park and take their beers into the park. And that's because they just have a really fantastic window display of loads of really interesting options and beers to choose from. And they've kind of built it out, and it's that if you go in there, lots of singles. I can get kind of whatever I want, mix and match something for my mates. And actually, they are the ones that you see everybody go into to get their cans for the park. Now, you as an independent brewer, you can help people like corner shops do that. Actually, relatively low cost. You can even provide fantastic signage for their window. If you're talking about specific occasions, going to Brockwell Park, don't forget to pop in and pick up your brews. Exclusively stock, but you could create fabulous window displays for them. You can help them, you can support them. And I think that's where, yes, some of those smaller venues who do not have the infrastructure in place or necessarily the knowledge to be able to kind of build the category themselves, you can help with that. And also maybe, perhaps, I mean, obviously you want to be competitive, but thinking about how you work together as well. Is it about you as an independent brewer just going, please, please, please stock mine? Or kind of saying, we are a collection of 5 local breweries and we can give you a fantastic selection so that you've got something for everybody. Think a little bit creatively about how you put together a package for them and how you help them manage their category in a way that, they don't have the resources of Sainsbury's.
So it does loop back to that sell-in story that we're talking about, but you're just applying the same logic to a different target ultimately. But I do love that idea. And actually, you think about the number of corner shops that you might have in one location, in one town, one village, one city. That's going to be far more than that of a supermarket that you might be stressing out about, oh, we'll never get into that place. So should you get more brand awareness because you're popping up in all these little locations versus one big one?
Absolutely. And you're providing proof of concept. If you do get to the point of going, look, I do want to go and start talking to a supermarket, I want to start having that conversation with Tesco's or Sainsbury's, being able to say, look, this is what we achieved, and try as much as you can, get metrics. What's your rate of sale like? How often did you sell out? Did you demonstrate that actually you could supply, you could restock quickly, because they'll be looking at that. How quickly can I restock if something sells out? So being able to provide proof of concept, look, we worked with this one local independent bar. We achieved fantastic things for them. Look what we did. And then being able to say, okay, you big boys, we can replicate this for you. That's a really valuable thing. Then you've got real credibility. I mean, I would say, I think it's always worth looking. I think spirits brands are better generally at working with the on-trade than beer brands. And I would encourage people to look at some of the spirits brands to see how they've done their on-trade. And there's loads of stuff online. There's been lots of kind of awards around it. You can find it. 2 brands I would really look at are Monkey Shoulder whiskey and Kraken rum. And I think they are absolutely just the best possible case studies for how to do the on-trade and how to do on-trade engagement. And I know they're owned by slightly, bigger companies, but they're not owned by the biggest. They're relatively smaller players that did feel kind of locked out in distribution terms. And if you look at some of the amazing stuff they did, it's really, really impressive on a relatively low budget.
What kind of stuff are we talking about here? Beyond people having to remember to go and Google, Monkey Shoulder or Kraken. So what are the things where you're like, that's clever, they should try that, do this?
So I think that, the number one thing is that strong brands they start with your audience. You've got to be, we talk about being kind of consumer orientated, but it's kind of audience orientated. So it just comes back again to that point of your selling story is about them, not you. So always about them. And I think Monkey Shoulder, a really, really great example of kind of actually understanding what do people, bartenders need in order to be able to sell this product. Whiskey's seen as complicated. This was a whiskey that you were going to have to mix. People might have questions about the flavor. They produce fantastic tools, cheat sheets, ways of getting bartenders specifically to understand how to talk about the product. But because they recognize that was the big gap, that actually a lot of bartenders just not comfortable or confident talking about it. So how do we fill that gap? But they did it with huge amounts of personality. So they had kind of one big simple idea, which is the whiskey that you can mix. They created loads of merch around mixing. That by the time they got big, they took it to a kind of bonkers level where they would actually turn up outside your bar with a cement mixer, like a giant cement mixer, but that serve cocktails, which is absolutely brilliant. I mean, you look online, you'll see these faces, this amazing like cocktail shaker stuff. It was brilliant. But if you look behind that, what you can see is real insight into what's the big barriers for our trade people. So they made it fun, but really focusing on that education piece. Kraken, that's all about impact. So big, simple, creative idea. Obviously, the Kraken is their logo, their emblem, their distinctive asset, and just really working that. So they teamed up with a small number of independents, did amazing like special builds of like the Kraken's arm coming out of the window and things like that. But again, behind the scenes, what they also built was a network of connected independents, kind of get to feedback to them and say, well, what do you need? How can we help you? How do we develop this category called rum that at the moment is just Malibu? Again, kind of cocktail serves. So really looking very closely at what those on-trade venues needed, independent on-trade venues needed in terms of support to kind of build the brand. And I think spirits tends to be a bit better at that than beer.
I think there might be an aspect of, I can imagine breweries going, well, we'd love to do X, Y, and Z, but it all comes down to budget. But I think in even bottle shops and stuff where they've gone, it's wonderful when they put a pack of balloons in the box with the 12 beers. It's really not exactly, a bank busting exercise to go, here's a poster, here's some balloons, and here's some beer mats. Like, they're going to start putting them out. And that's small scale. Then you can work on your inflatable, octopus arms and Kraken arms, whatever it needs to be. But just do a little something, right?
Exactly. I don't get me wrong, of course budget helps. Okay, yeah, that's true. But firstly, most of your audience, I would imagine, are targeting a specific local area. So you're not, when we talk about, but I haven't got the reach and I haven't got the big budgets of big brands. The reason that big brands have big budgets is they need to reach everybody in the country. In fact, they need to reach everybody in the world in order to keep growing. That's how they grow, is by having incredible reach everywhere. You've only got to get good reach in a very small area, and you would be amazed how affordable that is. Shop windows are your canvas, and as you say, online print stores now, you can do, sorry, I don't remember, it's like digital printing or whatever, but you can print one-off personalized posters for individual shops, individual bars, incredibly cheaply. So you say beer mats, t-shirts for bartenders, but as long as it's cool and interesting, and I think that's the other thing, fits the venue's vibe, like that. They want things that will enhance their branding. So rather than just thinking, how do I do a t-shirt that's got our branding on it, how do I do a t-shirt that actually the owner of that bar is going to want their bartenders wearing because it suits their aesthetic, it looks good. And again, that's something that you can do that the big guys can't. So not free, but we're not talking about spending a fortune on big budget campaigns.
And it comes back to, like you say, that selling idea that if you spent time in that venue, you'll be able to see, actually, they've got their own beer mats, so there's no point sending those in, or they've got their own branded merch. And you can pinpoint that moment, like, this actually could be a place, this could be a thing that we could give them, and they use it. Or actually have the conversation, I suppose, going, branded glassware, do you use that? And they go, well, yeah, if it's on for the next couple of months, we might, or might not. But it all starts with the conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think the things like branded glassware, like, everybody does it. How many times have you been into a pub and been given like a pint of Guinness in a Corona glass and things like, it's kind of great for a bit, and then nobody really keeps on top of it. The bar staff are really busy. It's relatively rare that actually that kind of stuff gets kind of really used properly. So, but again, that's because I think the big players, they are a bit limited. They have to produce things that are relatively standardized. Like, well, what is something every bar needs? Okay, every bar needs glasses. We'll do glasses. They kind of have to do that. You don't have to do that if you're smaller. You can think, well, what does this bar need? Not every bar, just this bar. And use that. All brand building starts with understanding your audience and including your trade audience. So really thinking about who they are, as you say, going in, talking to them. Is it that they want more exciting taps? Is it that actually they've got big windows and they need things to go in the windows? Is it stuff to go on the floor, stuff to go on the ceiling? Is it, as you say, is it coasters? Is there something? Are they serving food? Do they need some newer menus? You can help with that.
I'm thinking like, just especially at the moment where it's hot and everyone's going out into beer gardens. If you're sat around and you're looking at everyone uncomfortably shifting on beer benches and stuff, then outdoor cushions that have your brewery on it and things like that, they're going to be like, oh, thank God, you've fixed a problem for me. And it just takes that little bit of attention to go, yeah, there's a gap. We can double down on this.
Blankets, ice bucket, like there's sorry, we don't need to list merch, but I think you're absolutely right. Just like literally trying to think beyond coasters and glasses. Because I think the one thing it sounds like a tiny secret to give away, but honestly, big brands really struggle to think beyond coasters and glasses. They really do. And I think if you can think beyond, and I understand why, it comes back to that kind of, you have to over optimize. Every bar needs coasters and glasses. We'll do coasters and glasses. But if you can make that mental shift to, okay, but what does this bar need? You will get so much further.
So we've now talked about the selling story, the product story. How much of the other things that we've touched on build into the third point, which we started this conversation with, which is the comms plan. Let's put a bow around the comms plan. Because if a brewery's gone, right, we know who we're going to target, we know what they need, we know how to communicate that, and actually we can break away from the authentic quality narrative that everyone seems to be banging the drum on. This final piece of the puzzle is the comms plan, correct? How do we do it?
Yeah. Okay. So I would start in a very, very simple, boring place, which is your distinctive assets. And I don't know how familiar your audience are with distinctive assets and that concept, but
the audience are incredibly intelligent and we shouldn't underestimate their brains. But just for the benefit of me, because I don't know, please tell me what a distinctive asset is, Alice.
So a distinctive asset is basically the shortcut for your brand. You can talk about it as your kind of emblem, but sometimes it's a logo, sometimes it's something else. So if we're looking at, we've got Johnny Walker up there, and it's probably got one of the, you can't see it now, but it's got kind of probably the most famous distinctive asset in the world, which is the Striding Man. And it's a really great example because it ties directly into their brand story. So their brand story is all about progress and marking moments of personal progress. What is their logo? It is a man striding forward. So there's a kind of absolute frictionless tie-up between their big brand asset, which in their case is their logo, and the story that they're trying to tell, or the occasion that they're trying to own, which is about progress. It doesn't have to be your logo. It can be your name as well, or it can, in some cases, it can be a really distinctive aesthetic. I think the obvious kind of recent example of this is Brixton Brewery. I think you've had them on.
Yeah, Jez came on the show. It was a great chat.
Yeah, it was really good. And I think they're a really interesting example because I happen to know, living in the area, there's about 5 other local brewers nearby. And Whisper It, I think some of them have got better products.
Scandalous.
But they do. But they're not called Brixton. And the word Brixton, it's sticky, it's memorable, it's something that's kind of already got a cultural connection to it. People hear it and it means something. And as well as them obviously, I'm sure they're incredibly well-run business who's done everything right. But honestly, I do think a huge amount of their success is down to the fact that in amongst all of these local brands, they were the ones that went, well, why don't we just call it Brixton? And and it's really sticky. So your distinctive asset, it can be your name, it can be your logo, it can be a mascot, the Tony Tiger from, if you think of cereal, things like that. But it's the one thing that's going to be sticky and make people think of you. And if you've got a limited budget, it's absolutely vital, because long, complicated stories about how you started in your garage and you're building it and you're using organic hops, right? Like, you don't have time to get that across. There will be some people who will do their research and want to know that and find out about you. But most people are going to engage at a kind of real top level. And for that, what you need is a distinctive asset. And I would say, again, maybe I'll get told off this, I don't think beers are particularly good at this. And not actually just the small players. I think a lot of the bigger players as well have a kind of, there's sort of there's two beer aesthetics. There's we're old, or maybe three. There's we're bland, we're old, we're punk.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that's it. And there's not very many really distinctive assets within beer. And I think when small brands start up, they perhaps don't go into it with that mindset of, well, what is going to be our big asset that we're going to put on everything, we're going to share everywhere, that people will recognize all the time, every time, and we're going to use it all the time, every time, in order to kind of build that fame locally. So that's where to start.
Mm-hmm. And then what do? We have a distinctive asset. We have a turtle, a cool, trendy turtle, not a punk rock turtle. There's too many of those around, obviously. But we've got a turtle. What do we do with our turtle? Where should we put this turtle?
Where should we put a turtle? I don't think that's a question I've ever been asked. Where should we put our turtle?
This is the show of questions which are asked first, and never again shall we ask them, Alice. So give it some thought.
Okay. Anywhere where it's going to get seen. I mean, I think, again, I know you're going to say, yeah, but money. Okay. Outdoor advertising is so cheap. Like, it's so cheap. You can hire yourself a social media manager, but for a fraction of the cost, you could also get the the bus siding at the bus stop that stops right outside the biggest venue in your local town. I promise you, for far less money. You can. Outdoors a fantastic medium for high impact, high reach, lots of potential to be really creative, and super localized. There's no point having an Instagram account where you get 30,000 likes and shares, but there's only 5 people who live in the area that can actually buy your beer. That's pointless versus one poster that's perfectly positioned. Think about those kind of things. So again, think about store windows. Can you convince it? Can you do something really cool with stickers and decals? And store windows are potential billboards for you. Can you use them? What can you do? And just get that distinctive asset out there. And if you've done a good job in picking the right kind of distinctive asset, something that is memorable, something that has meaning, it will stay in people's brains. It will lodge there. It will build. You will build that message with people. But I think, again, I understand why. It's because it's an owned channel. But far too many startup brands concentrate hugely on the kind of digital side of comms. And that's not valuable, but it does have very limited reach, especially if you're not putting money behind it.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, isn't it? I remember saying that if a post gets 1,000 likes, well, that's the equivalent of giving away 1,000 free beer tokens, and only 3 people kind of coming to check in. It's a sign of interest, but people still won't buy the beer. I really love the idea of the side of the bus stop advertising, because again, my mind's looping right back to the sell-in story. And if you know that people are getting off the bus and going to that venue, which is only 10 feet around the corner, as it were, you can actually tie in with the venue and direct people towards it, and you get that goodwill from them because you're actually drawing more and more in there. It's kind of 2 birds, 1 stone in that respect.
Absolutely, yeah. Proudly and exclusively serve that Bob's Bar. If you're going to a bar owner and saying, well, that's what we're going to do, we're going to run a billboard like literally just around the corner, and we're going to mention that we're served here, that's a huge sell-in story. That's like, okay, I want to go with the brand that's going to do that for me, because none of the big guys are offering to do that. That's and again, you can target, you can tailor, you can personalize. Is the message in the mood for Chinese? Go around the corner to here, and by the way, pick up our rice beer while you're there. You can really tailor it to them in a way that's very, very hard for big brands to do.
Alice, this has been amazing, and the time has flown. So I want to try and recap really quickly on this for those people who maybe haven't had an opportunity to hear it all. So of course, we focused on these 3 areas of the sell-in story. Like, how is it applicable to the location, to the venue that you're trying to get your beer into? It's then the product story. How does that fill a gap? How does that work for them? We talked about not even trying to target some of the same places that your bigger breweries will get into, because you've probably got a better chance of doing something really unique and beneficial for both parties with your corner shops or your independent restaurants and stores. And then on top of that, we talked about distinct visual assets, be it a logo, a turtle, be it a name, something that is so easy to go, oh yeah, that's that place, and then just spread it far and wide, but just don't always double down on the digital stuff. Think about what's really going to have the best return for you based on your goals. And you've got to win in your local area a lot of the time first before you even consider going any further. Did I miss anything in that recap?
No, that was absolutely perfect. I hope it's useful. I know for some people it will feel kind of obvious, but I think it is just worth revisiting your plan with that filter and thinking, am I really, those are the basics, but doing the basics well is a huge part of marketing. And you would also be amazed how many big brands don't do the basics well. So if you can beat them.
What an empowering message to finish this one on. Alice, where would you suggest people go to look to, maybe discover your ramblings if you're happy people following you along on social media? But, where can we direct people to find out more about yourself and about ICC and everything else about you?
I'm on LinkedIn, which is how we met, only, as I say, because actually occasionally I just feel like I have to get it all off my chest. In case you haven't noticed, I do tend to ramble and rant, but I'm very friendly, and I do, I'm always interested in anything that's going on in the alcohol world. So I love hearing from people with new ideas and new stuff. So, feel free to, honestly, reach out, get in touch. I'm genuinely interested to see what's happening and what's new. So love to hear from people.
Okay, LinkedIn it is. Alice, once again, thank you so much for your time today. I really found it fascinating. It was wonderful to break it down so systematically and go, right, this, and this. It was fantastic. Everyone else who's tuned in, as always, you bloomin' rock. I love you guys and girls taking 40 minutes of your well-earned time. If you're watching this live now, what are you doing? Get back to work. You've got beer to brew. But if you're listening to this in the van on your next delivery, I hope you're dropping it off as somewhere lovely. They invite you in. They offer you half a pint, maybe a cup of tea, depending on the time. But whatever it is, you rock. The Brand Weaver loves you. And I'll see you on the other side, people. Rock on. That's a wrap on this week's episode of Branding for Breweries. If you got something great from it, hit follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite streaming app. Or even better, leave a review, share it with your brewery pals, or get in touch, because I want to chat to you. Rock on!